I'm Dane Rose. If we look at human evolution, there is a process of dividing, synergizing, dividing, synergizing in an ongoing process of association and dissociation that leads to uniqueness, that leads to growth, that leads to grace. Now, in human evolution, we have the child in a state of yes, in a state of sympathy, moving to the adolescent in a state of antipathy, in a state of rebellion, and then the synergy of the adult emerging out of that unconditional yes and that unconditional rebellion, the absolute and unquestioning yes and the unquestioning no. We have an adult. We have a new consciousness that combines the best and worst traits of both parents in a cultural environment and leads to something new. If that process occurs, if the innocence of the child is broken through the betrayal of an imperfect world, we have the adolescent, the rebellion. And if the rebellion is honored and welcomed and survives, now we have the two poles out of which a unique individual, a unique adult is formed. Now, this ties in with the process of resilience, or the phenomena of resilience, because the child, in its unconditional yes with the status quo, is in a secure position. The adult, from a place of wisdom, of understanding, making informed yeses and nos. I'll accept this bit from my childhood, I'll reject that bit. I will utilize this skill from my mother, but not this habit. I'll do this bit from my father, this bit from my family, but not this one. The adult, reintegrated after the rebellion of the adolescent, is in a strong position. The most vulnerable state in the human maturation process is the adolescent, because in rejecting the status quo, rejecting the parents, rejecting the culture, rejecting the religion, there is a process of individuation, there is a process of isolation. And that isolation is fragile on the resilience continuum. And in order to understand that fragility, let's first look at the law of mass. The law of mass dictates that when a pinball and a bowling ball collide, the pinball goes flying, and the bowling ball continues on its original trajectory with a slight reduction in velocity that is measured by the pinball's impact. Meaning the pinball impact is, the velocity of the pinball is absorbed and slows the bowling ball down. If the pinball is 1/100th of the mass of the bowling ball, then it will slow the bowling ball down by 1/100th. But the pinball is sent flying in a completely new trajectory. And this is the law of mass. Now, the law of mass dictates that when an individual is collided with a group, that the individual has to change, that when a person walking across the street is collided with a bus, the individual goes flying. If we step back a moment further and look at energy patterns on an abstract level, we can see that everything that is known to exist is energy in a pattern, and that all energies have different densities, different masses, and different sizes. So the density combined with the size, combined with the speed of a pattern of energy, determines whether when two energies meet, one of them will go flying, they both come to a dead stop. If two exactly the same speed buses hit each other, same velocity, same mass, one doesn't push the other. They crumple as the shock of those two energies colliding destroys and ruptures the structure of the pattern that is called bus. But one doesn't push the other out of the way. Well, one of the things that we understand from the study of cycles, Dewey wrote a beautiful book called The Study of Cycles, in which he analyzed and learned that everything that is observable has a rhythm, has a cycle. Atoms have a cycle. Pork belly futures have a cycle. Copper has a cycle. Commodity prices as a whole have a cycle. Stock markets have cycles. People walking have a cycle. The sun has a cycle. The universe has a cycle. Breath has a cycle. So a cycle is a complete loop. Something goes up, it comes down. Something breathes out, and it breathes in. That's a cycle. You go to sleep, you wake up. You go to sleep, you wake up. There's a rhythm. There is a rhythm. So we can look at the universe as a pattern, as a symphony of patterns of energy in a rhythm. And that it's really all rhythms within rhythms within rhythms, because if you look at what is an atom, it is the rhythm of two particles and a vast amount of space. But the particles are moving very fast, and so they consume, meaning it's hard to penetrate that space. Just like you could have one particle spinning this fast and you couldn't really move through it because it's going too fast. If it's going very slow, you could move through it and avoid it. But if it's going so fast you can't think, how can you walk through that energy field? You can't. And within an atom, 99% of an atom is space. Within the universe, 99% of the universe is space. So you have this particle that's very small, moving in rhythm with different velocities, with different densities, with different masses, relating, colliding, opening, experiencing with other particles. And depending on how the relationship works, is it a relationship of violation? Is it a relationship of attunement and respect? Is it a relationship of partnering? Is it a relationship of synergizing? Depending on how these energy patterns intersect and relate. You have the destruction, the dissolution, the dissolving of that energy pattern in that formation. Or you have cohesion. And identity, identity, meaning me, what I call me. We identify with a body. We identify with a thought pattern. We identify with a set of feelings produced by those thought patterns, a set of beliefs and feelings produced by those beliefs, a set of memories along with feelings that those memories produce. The pattern of the individual in an isolated state is far more vulnerable to change, dissolution, death, disease, collapse, illness, than that meeting that same energy in a group. And so what makes, and you can understand that, because if you have 5 people tightly holding hands and bound, etc., and they run into one person, statistically speaking, if the one person is the same weight as each of the 5, the one person will move, will collapse, will fall down, and the 5 will prevail because they're acting as one. They're in community, they're in team. Whether we're talking about state, certain emotional states, laughter. If 5 laughing people encounter one scowling person, generally speaking, if there's the desire, the enjoyment, the laughter continues. If one laughing person encounters one scowling person, usually the laughter evaporates because there's a collision and there's equal mass. And so both change to some degree. Now, in order for evolution, in order for diversity, and nature is a diverse and a diversity-producing algorithm, to produce more diversity, the individual must separate from the family through the process of antipathy, and then come to its new synthesis as a new adult and create a new family. And now the process, and whether we're talking biological or friendship or sexual or whatever the new family is, it's out of the synergy of what was, but it's something new. Now, this period of rebellion, of antipathy, and one could say that in some cases, some cultures are more adolescent cultures because they're about the rebellion, the American way to go and make your own way. Think your own thoughts. No one's going to tell me what to do. It's a very adolescent culture compared to an ancient Thai culture that's 4,000 years old rather than 400 years old, that's focusing much more on community. Now, there have been 10,000 cultures in human history, and nature abhors monocrops because monocrops fail. Monocrops become susceptible to major collapses, as we learn if we study the Irish potato famine, where an entire country largely dependent on one staple, the potato, and then, of course, when the perfect mite exponentially expands its population fed by the potato, and the potato crop fails, well then the entire culture and species, or the entire country fails as well. Millions die because of monocropping, a lack of diversity that wouldn't have happened. That could have arrived if there were 20 vegetables and meats all evenly distributed, because you just lose 1/20, not 80% of the food staple. So there's a sense of value. Nature teaches and demonstrates diversity. And so there's this need to grow and become more and more diverse, which, as I say, begins with sympathy, moves to antipathy, and then comes to a new synthesis, and the program goes forward. If we remember Dewey's study of cycles, and we are mindful that every single thing in the universe has a cycle. Hurricanes have a cycle. Droughts have a cycle. Depreciation of the dollar has a cycle. Inflation and collapsing of stock has a cycle. If we understand that there is a rhythm, that there is a cycle for everything, then one of the most important kind of guidelines is diversification. Diversification in friendships, diversification in stocks, diversification in skill sets, diversification of mentalities, diversification of states. There are certain phenomena in which the Stoic state, the state of the Stoic, does very, very well. Being in prison might be one of them. Hardship that cannot be avoided, Stoicism. There are other environments in which exuberance and enthusiasm and playfulness has a tremendous benefit. And there are other environments where that will get you killed. Exuberant, playful, curious in a volcano, dead. There are certain environments in which being terrified, fearful, cautious will keep the body alive. There are other environments where it's wasted and you live a life of unnecessary mediocrity and misery because the threats were imagined, where one's acting in a lockdown state in a relatively safe world. And so every human state, every human value has a place, a time and a place in context where it facilitates growth, and has a time and a place and a context in which it destroys the body, the life, the well-being, in which it's not intelligent. Now, many energies, masses, patterns of energy in our world are larger than the individual. And so if the individual runs into them, be it a bus, be it a financial collapse, be it a divorce, be it whatever it is, if the individual is identified as an individual and the pattern, whether it's a hurricane, a tornado, a drought, a disease, is larger than the mass of the individual will topple. And this is where the value of community comes in. Because if you have 5 individuals, then working together, then you can encounter an energy pattern that is 5 times bigger and still meet it without collapsing, without dissolving. Because that's the end of the game. When your mind collapses, when your body collapses, when your finances collapse, it's the end of the game. You start over. If your finances collapse, you can perhaps, if you have the health and mentality and age, rebuild them. If your body collapses, the heart stops beating, it's game over. So, for the resilience of a species, for the resilience of the human species, the longevity, the sustainability, the volatility, the grace, the certainty, the enjoyment, the well-being, the security, the survival, the growth, the evolution of the human species, the most powerful configuration that the species can form is large groups of individuals volunteering to focus and interrelate as one. Now, what does it mean as one? Meaning in synchrony and harmony. So that, because if you think of humans as bolts and steel bars, well, if they're just laying all over the place, bolts and steel bars, there's no big thing one way or another. Just got lots of bolts and steel bars, and if there's an earthquake or a wind or you kick one, it's easy because they're not connected to everything else. But if you build a bridge with those bolts and steel bars connected strategically, in alignment, in attunement, now you kick one and the force of the kick doesn't send that bolt or steel bar flying, because that kick is absorbed into the entire bridge, and the mass of the bridge functioning as one, you stub your toe rather than kick the bar forward, because it's interlinked. You've got an integrity in the way the bolts are doing, and so it can survive a hurricane. It can survive 200 vehicles going across it at once without collapsing. And so the stronger the integrity, the attunement, the as one of a species, of a group, of a community, of a town, of a family, the more energy that group can absorb without collapsing. And what this does is it gives longevity to the formation of the family, to the community, to the town. Because small turbulences come every second. Bigger turbulences come every hour. Bigger turbulences come every day. And yet bigger turbulences come every month, every year, every decade. The longer the time span, think of the 60 million year comet or the meteorite, that dissolved the dinosaurs. That will happen again. Meaning scientists who study the probability of the Earth's ending say that one of the biggest threats to the end of all life on Earth is a meteorite, because they point out correctly that the object that obliterated dinosaurs was pretty small. But at the speed that it impacted the Earth, it changed the Earth's history. That will happen again. Everything comes in cycles. There will be an object bigger than the one that destroyed the dinosaurs or smaller. But some big patterns happen every 60 million years. Nevertheless, the species' resilience is dramatically amplified if, as a species, asteroids are met and encountered. Satellites in the atmosphere, nuclear rockets to dissolve the asteroid before it hits, things like that. An individual cannot do that. Only a species or a country can do that. Because if you look at how complicated, you look at just something like my shirt. It was easy. I pressed buy, right? Easy. I entered a few digits. It arrived at my door, easy. But for it to happen that easily, we're talking about millions of people operating in millions of let's say thousands of specialized industries, growing crops. The agricultural revolution had to happen before cotton was farmed and grown. Fertilizers had to be invented. Machineries had to be invented before this could be this price. The mechanized loom had to be invented. Thread, dye, shipping containers, ships. There are millions of people working before so that this turtleneck could arrive in this color, in a piece of plastic, in a piece of cardboard at my door. Millions of people, and it's that millions of synergized people that lead to the low cost of the shirt. Because there was a time when a king could not buy a shirt like this. And now most of us can easily come up with the $20 to do so. And magically it'll appear in a few days on our door with little or no effort. It's not like we spent a season growing cotton and threading it and dyeing it and looking for red berries. We didn't do all that. It's become more graceful, and this is the power of synergy. So there's more resilience when a culture, a country interdependently faces a challenge. So if we understand that most of the things in the universe are vastly bigger than the individual, and we understand that all energy patterns are in relationship. Many scientists speculate that the universe itself is a big breath out, and that one day there'll be a big breath in and it'll disappear into the same black hole out of which it popped out in the Big Bang. If we understand that we're dealing with masses of energy, most of which is vastly bigger than the individual, on a study of cycle or in a rhythm of cycles from seconds to billions of years, then we understand that it is inevitable. It is inevitable for the energy in this body to interact with some of these very big patterns. The Great Depression, the plague, the blossoming of the internet, all these different positive and negative forces that just explode onto the landscape with exponential impact. In order to have resiliency and cohesion, the larger the group of people that function as one, the larger the group of people that can absorb the impact of these changes together. Now, the next ingredient in resilience is specialized talent. Now, an individual can only get good at so many things to such a degree in 30, 40, 80 years, whatever. If I want to be an exceptional cellist, I may need to start practicing at age 7, 6 hours a day. Now, if I just play the cello starting at age 20, an hour a week, I am never going to get to the quality of cello playing, of playing 6 hours of cello a day since I was 7. Now, if a cellist is spending 7 hours a day playing the cello in order to create exquisite cello sounds, they're going to need support, because the cellist has to eat and go to the bathroom, But they don't have time to invent a toilet. They don't have time to build a house because, well, they can be hammering nails 8 hours a day and playing the cello 6 hours or 7 hours a day. So there's, in order to be supported in these specialized activities, you need to be together. You need to say, you be the best cellist and we'll pay you a lot of money to, play at this theater once a month or once a week or once a night. And then we'll pay you enough money so that other people can grow your food for you. Now, the more specialized skills relative to survival, growth, and education that a culture, a species, an individual has, the more resilient they are. If you know how to drive a car, you're more resilient than if you don't, because some situations call on you to drive a car in order to survive. You're out in the middle of the desert, you realize you have no food, there's a car there, you don't know how to drive it, well, you die from hunger. You don't have any food or any water. You know how to get in the car and go and get some, you have more resilience. If you know how to make money, if you know how to invest money profitably, you have more resilience in the financial ecosphere than if you do not. So functioning as one specialized, valuable talent. Next comes trust. So the more specialized talent, because some situations call for a bomb to be diffused. If no one in your circle has that talent, boom, bomb, game over. Some situations call on you to grow crops. If no one knows how to grow the crops die, no food, boom, game over. So the more specialized talent that a group has, the more it functions as one, the more resilient. The more trust, the more resilience, because how can you function as one if you don't trust other people? How can you do your job well if you can't trust that other people have your back? So trust is an efficiency gainer. A species that can trust each other to have the group's interest at heart is at least 3 times more likely to survive than a sociopathic culture that cannot trust its fellow people to have their back given an opportunity, because security costs must go up. When you do not trust people, you need a deterrent and you need a military capability. You need locks. You see, you don't need car locks. You don't need house locks. You don't need guns. You don't need missiles. You don't need car alarms. You don't need police. If you can trust every member of your group to have the best interest of the group in mind. If you can do that, your group does not need to spend vast amounts of the national budget on military expenditures, policings, prisons, discipline, locks, alarms. Every single one of those activities could be invested in medicine, could be invested in education, could be invested in an asteroid deterrent. So trust leverages the specialized talent and functioning as one, and it leads to a deeper level of functioning as one, and it ties into brain development. The reptilian brain, zero trust. The limbic brain, zero trust. The rational brain, strategic trust. A sociopath can be rational, and obviously they don't steal things from people when they're watching. So you can use the rational brain to violate and betray more sophisticatedly. It's only when you come to the empathic brain that you have the capacity to love and love is trustworthy. Not abuses and violations and stupidities labeled as love, but actual love. Caring for another person's well-being independent of one's own. Supporting and wishing the other well. This requires the empathic brain. And with the empathic brain or the enlightened sociopathic brain combined with rationality, you have varying degrees of trust. A sociopath engaging with another sociopath, you have MAD, mutual assured destruction. So I'm a sociopath, I'd happily blow you up. I just know that if I did, you'd blow me up. And for sociopathic reasons, I rationally avoid conflict with you. So sociopaths can avoid conflict, but both people have to have the ability to harm and destroy the other. Without that, one dominates and destroys the other, and then there's no cohesion. You've reduced the capacity of resilience of the group down to the sociopath, which is a lower level of intelligence. A sociopath is too dumb to understand that true enlightened self-interest involves being part of something bigger than themselves, and certainly doesn't understand the brain codes necessary to do that, because a sociopath is operating using reptilian software, which is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. There's no empathy. A sociopath is not a sociopath if they are primarily operating from the empathic brain. So the empathic brain gives rise to partnering, to love, to caring, and to trust. And as a result of the empathic brain, trust is born, with trust being legitimately earned and born out of an empathic culture. Defense spending, which is mental defense, emotional defense, physical defense, and financial defense. At least 70% of the budget of energy is freed up when there is trustworthiness, competency, love, specialized talent, and functioning as one. It is hundreds of percent more efficient to function in that environment. And because of that efficiency, and because nature rewards the evolution towards grace, towards efficiency, you have an exponential expansion in the probability field of resilience and survival. Competency, of course, ties in there. It's not just specialized talent. It's being competent at that talent. And the bigger the mass of people that are able to form one structure. You think of a triangle. It's three. And if there's just three lines just laying around, it's not half as strong as the triangle. But the triangle is not as strong as the six-sided. It's the three-sided. The triangle is not as strong as the six-sided shape, as the 20-sided shape. The more complexity, the more people are involved in harmony and in alignment, the more you have a growth towards complexity. And so the individual, going from the innocence of the child, accepting the status quo, rejecting the status quo with all of its faults, moving to create a new status quo out of some of the yeses and some of the nos, and something new in the synergy of the adult. As adults partner in conscious synergy with one another, to function as one with specialized talent, with the empathic brain giving rise to care, giving rise to love, giving rise to trust. With competency comes a tremendous amount of success and well-being. And with success and well-being and competency, a growing sense of mass. because people are attracted to technology that works. All humans reference the desire to feel sustainably better and the desire to avoid unnecessary and chronic suffering. And so when a mass of people are functioning as one in harmony with fun, which is where it all ultimately leads. Fun is the only self-referential value because it's fun to have fun, and so you have fun. It's more fun to have fun than not to have fun, so you move towards more fun. It's more fun to be free, so you move more fun. Freedom is in service of fun. Power is in service of fun. Wealth is in service of fun. It's more fun to be wealthy than to be poor. It's more fun to be powerful than to be helpless. It's more fun to be free than to be imprisoned. It's more fun to love than not to love. Conscious, masterful fun is the pinnacle. It's more fun to succeed than it is to fail. But ultimately, it all ends in fun. And why? Because it's more fun to have fun than not to have fun. It becomes a self-completing process with every other value underneath it, supporting it. Why work to survive? Why struggle? Because it's more fun to survive than not to survive. Thank you.